I'll call to order this work session and note all council members present except Ms. Lorenz, who I'm sure is on the way. We've had no one sign up for public comment, so we'll just go right into the introduction. This is kind of the culmination of some work that's being done for quite a while now. And two public meetings that had very, very good turnout and very robust participation, which is always a good sign. And so, Ms. Reese, do you have anything to say before we introduce Ms. Farr?
Just, am I mic? Okay. The only thing I'll add is, thank you to the Farr and Associates team for working with us. We've got staff here also, to respond to any questions council may have, but we're gonna start the work session this evening with Mr. Farr, kind of rolling out the Uptown South Master Plan, which has been, after a number of months of public input and analysis and survey and evaluation. So we're excited to have this presented to you this evening. And following this evening's discussion, the plan will be posted on the town's website. I think we call it Normal Forum, but it's basically our project page. So, Mr. Farr?
Great. Mayor, manager, good evening, council, friends. I'm glad to be here tonight and wanted to lead you through the draft plan. We're very excited to be still working with the town of Normal, a generation in, on making Uptown and Uptown South just great special places. So you're gonna see a lot of old and a little bit of new tonight. For anyone who's been involved in the process to date, show of hands in the room, who's been involved in prior meetings? A lot of folks. How about first timers? Nobody. So everyone, this will all seem pretty familiar except for this cover rendering. So we wanted to have some sort of image that described the public space, the principal public space that the plan proposes. 5-story buildings on both sides of a kind of divided parkway. And so you can see the rendering here. There's two women kind of waving at each other, balcony to balcony. On the right-hand side, the image is a little dim, but you'll see that again. So I want to take you through seven items and then Q&A. I'll just take you through it. So the project background, I think this is known very well to people in this room. There have been plans prepared for Uptown before it was called Uptown, starting in 1999 and 2000. They were updated in 2015 when a significant portion of the plan had been developed, but the market had changed, and so that was called Uptown 2.0. And then with the arrival of Rivian, the change in the economy, all kinds of things, it made perfect sense to dial in Uptown South again, beginning in 2022 and then sort of finishing this year. So you can see the aerial photographs across the top of how facts on the ground have changed, as a result of the plans, and then the plans and their evolution across the bottom. So sort of two big things to know is that, why are we here today? The 2015 plan called for the creation of an underpass, which is underway. It's being designed and constructed, and people in this room know far more about it than I do. What's most significant about it is that Uptown itself, north of the tracks, is fairly close to being done and complete. With Trailside East and Trailside West, we're kind of running out of new stuff to do. So it makes perfect sense to extend Uptown to south of the tracks, and the underpass will do that in the most pedestrian and bike-friendly connected way. So it's pretty amazing feat that the town has found funding to do that. So the study area pictured here on the right, if you can see the cursor come through, it does not really. So anyway, the study area is 7.37 acres, bounded on Linden to the east, Irving to the south, and Constitution Trail on the west. And it's got 5 buildings on the site, and we'll take you through all that. So as the mayor referred to, we've had a series of meetings. Actually, we've had one online survey and 3 public meetings, July, September, and November. And so actually the July one was virtual. That's right. So 2 in person that were wildly well attended. So appreciate folks coming out. So, and across the bottom again are the deliverables that people might remember from those meetings. The survey resulted in a lot of kind of data and statistics about what the community preferences were what's shown here in microcosm are the preferences on the different types of open space people were interested in. Then in the virtual meeting in July, we showed 3 different ways to enclose space adjacent to what's called the South Plaza. In the September meeting, we showed 3 completely different schemes, and we got a lot of feedback, and people told us what was working and what was not, and then the November meeting sort of pulled it together. So market opportunities. We wanted to just share that our sub-consultant, financial consultant, SB Friedman, did a thorough market analysis, and we found pretty much only good news. The housing market in McLean County and Normal in particular is very tight, which is, if you're a landlord or wanting to build housing, that's a good thing. If you're trying to find housing, that's not a good thing. But prices are up to the point where new construction seems to be justifiable. The job growth, as you know, from Rivian and suppliers and everything is on a strong trend. So anyway, and the facts go, basically non-student rental units have been, rented up almost instantly. The price to date at $1.79 a square foot is not quite at the $2 per square foot threshold we look for to justify new construction, but with the amenities that are proposed here, I think we'll get there. Let's see, lots of demand for housing, and then finally urban style housing. So that is to say not detached single family, but typically multi-story apartment, elevator sort of buildings, and other missing middle types of buildings. So, and then just coming back at it again with multifamily, Rivian's added 800 jobs during the year 2022. The population is growing, trends are good, and student housing, if we wanted to go there, is also a further demand factor. So the master plan, here's the illustrative master plan, and just again to orient, Constitution Trail on the west, Linden on the east, and then Irving on the south, 7.37 acres. This illustrative plan shows, I think, 15 different plan elements. I think we'll show it to you a bunch of different ways, but just at the highest level, to orient everybody, that's the Amtrak track there. Does the cursor come through? I can't tell. Can anybody see that cursor? No? Okay. Anyway, the Amtrak tracks, hopefully you know where that is. And then down the middle, the kind of divided boulevard. So I'll show you this to you in other slides. So it is a mixed-use master plan. We've got sort of 4 elements here. One, the Amtrak building, which is its own thing. It's been there a while. We think there's an opportunity to improve it over the long term. The upper right we're calling the large format building, which is adjacent to the tracks, and we have 3 possible uses for it. The yellow is housing, and there's sort of mixed use and housing buildings, 5 of those over 2 phases. And then finally, mislabeled here, number 4, Amtrak, is really a mixed use parking structure. So that's the kind of blue there right off of Linden. Okay. So the first one, the Amtrak building that's there can be replaced and intensified with a multi-story building. It's a very small footprint. It would happen towards the end of a phase master plan, but we don't want to miss the opportunity to call it out. In terms of the large format building, we looked at it for 3 different uses. One is a large institution like a library or potentially a retail space. Second is housing. And the third, Olivia, is what? On different format? There isn't a third? Okay, just 2. These are all different configurations. Thank you. So housing, 5 different buildings in L shapes or U shapes. They total across 5 floors, 402,000 square feet, which is a lot of square feet. So that's hundreds of apartment units. We are proposing ground floor retail uses, particularly facing the new boulevard, and then upper story housing. We imagine all of the buildings will be elevator served to meet accessibility requirements and just to meet the market. And let's see, we'll show you in a minute the 3 buildings on the left, that the sort of stack of 3 buildings there would be in phase 2, and those can only be built if and when the municipal building is relocated. And then the 2 on the right can be built anytime. So parking is the 4th land use, and this one probably got moved around more than any other. And it's this site adjacent to Linden that ended up being kind of the one that it wanted to be there. It wanted to be really next to the tracks, but we could not figure out how to get in and out of it in any kind of sensible way. So we needed more points of entry in and out of the garage. And so it's a tight footprint, but it fits, and there's a little bit of room to the west for a little bit of liner building there. And you can see that we've gone to the level of detail of showing where the entries and exits are to show that it's a viable parking deck with more than one way in and out. As I mentioned, we proposed this new parkway, which you can't see my cursor, so take that, whatever. This new north-south parkway. And on the ground floor of those buildings, we think it's very important that they have a storefront frontage. That is to say, glass from 2 feet to 8 feet, pretty much transparency, entries closely spaced is kind of what we're calling there. The town could elect, and we recommend it, to actually adopt a form-based code over this little patch to deliver that sort of fine-grained attention to detail and walkability. On the right-hand side came out of the original survey back from June and July, where we asked, what is the preference? We want big buildings here, or little buildings here, or middle-sized buildings, and like the fine-grained character of Uptown now, which, if you'll remember, was based on this idea of let's respect the historic 30-foot parcels. So if you have a building that has multiple facades on it, you're kind of carving it up into smaller bite-sized bits. So we sort of propose that same thinking along our new north-south street, which needs a name, by the way. So I have several people in this room I would name it after, but it's not my call. So let's see, or maybe all of them. We'll come up with some good names. So open space. There was a lot of interest in getting the open space right. We worked with Jason Cooper at ECT Landscape Architects, and he did some lovely preliminary landscape plans for 4 open spaces. So I'm going to take you through them one at a time. But here they are in the upper left. You can see they're numbered and they're named: the Triangle Park, the Taylor Boulevard Parklet, and I don't think we can call it Taylor Boulevard, but that's our holding name for it now, the Courtyard, and then the Constitution Trail, Irving Street path. So here we go. So first of all is the Triangle Park. If you can look at the plan on the right-hand side, you can see the Amtrak tracks. The underpass project comes with a public space called the South Plaza, which is labeled there in small print. So what we're talking about is the Triangle Park that lays just below that. So that low line of trees, it's kind of a little hook shape there, kind of a Nike swish. Below that is the Triangle Park. So what we did was take a very nice proposed and going to be built next year public open space and expanded it by adding a kind of triangular kind of saddlebag sort of on the bottom. So, and we envision this as a kind of multi-use lawn or flex space, sit, roll out a blanket, throw a Frisbee, walk the dog, all those kinds of things. So much needed in Uptown South. There just isn't enough open space for everybody's enjoyment. So we're taking something great and making it a little big. So second one is in the master plan meeting in November, there was a strong push for having an open space, additional park space to the north as well as to the south. So the one that made sense to the south was, this thing we're calling the Parklet, Taylor Boulevard Parklet. So it's a divided parkway, not unlike Constitution Trail, but we pried the street quite wide to get adequate sort of area there in the middle. So Jason, the landscape architect, has illustrated this with, series of trees, north-south pathways, bioswales, rain gardens, and you can see some kind of reference images there in the lower left. But we see it as kind of a stormwater facility, continuing some of the legacy of Uptown, which is, those who don't know, is kind of nationally famous for the things it's done in stormwater. So we didn't want to just make another circle and plop a fountain in it, but we wanted to sustain those same values of stormwater retention and best management practices. So that's that one. Number 3, the Courtyard is rather than have how do I want to say this? Rather than have just regular streets, it makes sense to us that the streets that approach Constitution Trail should go from vehicular streets to a more pedestrian plaza-like character. So these two mixed-use buildings, which can only be built on the occasion that the municipal building is relocated to make way for it. We've sort of faced the two C-shaped buildings towards one another to create a common shared courtyard. This allows the town's standards for cul-de-sacs at 92 feet, which is about 42 feet bigger than it should be, but that's the law. So if the engineering staff wants a 92-foot circle, we got one for you, but hopefully it'll be a lot smaller than that. But so if an emergency vehicle wanted to come down this short, stubby street and do a 180, it could do so. So public safety is met, as is walkability. Excuse me. And then fourth, the Irving Street continuation. Rather than run a street to Constitution Trail, we're proposing it straight up as a plaza. It is a multi-purpose plaza so that vehicles can travel on it. It's a kind of a pervious hardscape. We propose this as a pervious paver street so that it does a stormwater retention function as well. So those are our four public open spaces. We can talk about those in greater detail if there are questions. Mobility. So we worked very hard to integrate and connect to the street grid to the east. And you can see we've got sort of loop roads and those two aforementioned sort of dead ends that approach Constitution Trail. We had made a decision early on, and it was confirmed in the community process, not to encourage vehicles to drive across Constitution Trail. So I think we have, in the early phase, still getting out of the police station, there's a kind of cut across there, but I think it goes away or becomes minimal in the second phase. But you can see here it's a very nice extension of the street network, acknowledging the fact that we really don't want streets crossing Constitution Trail. So that's the street grid. Bike network, again, bikes are going to be key here. With the underpass, you'll be able to bicycle along Constitution Trail, come from the north, around the circle, duck under the tracks. You'll be asked to dismount, I think, so keep it safe, people, keep it safe. But then you can continue south on Constitution Trail, and you can feed into the Constitution Trail linear park on pretty much all of these streets. So some of them are dedicated bike lanes, some of them are share lanes, but we see it as a kind of walk, bike mecca. One of the most important things that I think after multiple meetings we finally got right, oh my gosh, was the pickup and drop off. So there are three. They're a little microscopic here, but you can see it here in the tabular thing. So to the kind of, what do we call it, that amoeba-shaped thing labeled number 1 is a great insight that somebody had in the community meeting, that the way to get to a great drop-off is west of Constitution Trail. So is the person that suggested that here tonight, who was that? There she is. Okay, Karen, thank you. I was thinking it was you. Thank you for that. That was a great, and you introduced it as like, this is a secret, don't tell anybody, I do this all the time. And it became the centerpiece of the drop-off plan. So we think you can get about 20 cars in the configuration we have there. It is not city-owned land, so there's an acquisition required there, but it really sort of just snapped in like a Sears tool and made a lot of sense as the place that wanted to be. So that was drop-off number 1. Drop-off number 2, and this is one we have to just punt back to the town and Public Works, is figuring out a way to actually accommodate some pickup and drop-off on the circle north of the tracks. We say 3 to 4 cars, and we wish you luck with that. We didn't work that one out. And then 3 was something that we really wanted to get right with the Children's Discovery Museum, which was the bus drop-off south of the tracks. And so you see that circle number 3 there on our new Boulevard Street. So there's stacking room for, we think, 3 or 4 buses to stack successfully on the west side of that north-south street and make a loop and get back out onto Linden and so on. So it's not 6 or 8 or 10 buses, but it is very good. The kids, when they get off the bus, don't have to cross any streets. They do have to go under the underpass, so it's about think about a 100-yard walk, so, you know, a 3-minute walk, something like that. So we did work to get those buses as close to the mouth of the underpass as possible. And that was, those of you who, behind me, who were kind of making sure we got it right, saw the multiple iterations. So we didn't have it right for a long time. We listened, and I think we got it to a good place. So 3 different drop-offs, we sort of, you know, I don't want to say solved it, but we've addressed it very well. So rights of way is the name that planners give to streets and the adjacent public space. So here we've got sort of 5 different ones. This is a callback to 2015. A certain council member reminded us that it's very important that we go back and not fail to repeat the recommendation from 2015 that Linden do what's called a road diet. And so a road diet is just a commonplace occurrence in municipalities that have 4-lane streets, 2 travel lanes in each direction, that more often than not, they carry the same capacity of traffic at safer speeds and with other amenities like wider parkways and or bike lanes. And so this is a proposal from 2010. We're reheating it and representing it. This is a really good idea, and it's consistent with the rest of the plan. So the existing conditions is on the bottom. So it's 4 travel lanes, 2 northbound, 2 southbound, and we would replace that with this section on the top of the page with a center median and 1 travel lane in either direction. And when there's a left turn, you interrupt that center median. So road diet on Linden. Second one is Phoenix and Irving. We just are basically continuing what is there, the same right of way over. This is one illustration where there's dedicated bike lanes. I think there's an even better alternative, or competing alternative, where we would provide on-street parking again to support our storefront commercial and retail. So, and then finally Taylor Street, which is an east-west street and it bends north-south. We're calling it Taylor. That's not the right name. But basically what you've got is upper left is Taylor Street as we know it today. Upper right is Taylor Street with the drop-off. And then sort of bottom left is the divided Taylor Street, and you can see the kind of parklet in the middle. So, we're allocating bike lanes and parking lanes and bus drop-off lanes in those 3 sections. So you can see that there. And then sustainability. So one of the things that I'm just always proud about the plans and the leadership here in Normal is a focus on sustainability, which, again, if you don't know it, it's put the town on the map in all kinds of venues across the country. So 2 things, again, we are calling back recommendations from earlier studies. The 2003-2004 plan followed and met the standard, the LEED neighborhood development standard, and was certified as such in 2004, 5, 6, something like that, the 2000 aughts. So the plan we've prepared today repeats many and most of those principles from LEED and D. We aren't proposing to certify, but we are following the rules, following the checklist, and so on. So we've listed here 9 different things that we can point to LEED and D and say we're doing LEED and D. So that's a kind of callback to the 2004 study. The 2015 study, Uptown South, we had proposed the creation of one ambitious green building, the one that met the Living Building Challenge. And I know there were some starts and stops on that with the library project, but we think that's still a valid recommendation to find one of the buildings here that would pursue that. And maybe we can talk about that in the Q&A, but I come back to that because LEED was the thing when the town required it, was the first municipality to require LEED certified buildings in 2003. Wasn't in this council chamber because this council chamber didn't exist, but it was this council that passed that back then. And so to sustain that leadership, the world has moved on past LEED. Living Building Challenge is it. And so we can talk about that. And then what's new, kind of what we've come back and are proposing something rather ambitious. And this, I think we haven't really talked about this at all prior to tonight. So this idea of the all-electric development. So with the climate emergency, climate disruption, give it the name you want, going on, I think we can all see the future, and I believe that we need to figure out how to not burn fossil fuels as part of that future. So from a municipality standpoint, when you're doing new development, the one kind of biggest thing is a decision about whether that new development will be served with gas utilities. So we are proposing that gas utilities not be extended to this area and that all the development be electric. And that, I'm sure we will discuss that, but you are also already the electric city. We didn't invent that. I think there's a place called Rivian that's been talking about that a lot. So we pair that recommendation with another one, which is that if you want to heat buildings in our climate with all electric, you're going to use heat pump rather than electric resistance heating. That makes sense. But it makes a lot of sense to make them efficient buildings. So we call that passive buildings or FEIS. We can talk about all of that. But these two ideas of all electric and high efficiency, high performance buildings, we recommend that as the kind of the powerful statement the town could make. And there will be developers who will squawk and say that's impossible and it's, we're ahead of the curve, not possible. So we included these case studies. These are all projects from our office, so I can speak with confidence these things are possible. These are all electric and net zero. Actually, the upper two are net zero buildings. The bottom left is just all electric and passive house. So so it's doable. Glad to talk to anybody if it's a good conversation to have. So implementation. So this is phase one, and if you'll recall, partway through the process, we kind of had a good conversation to say we should do a plan that is feasible with and without the relocation of the municipal building. So what resulted from that was a fairly delightful plan. You can see here we really fit in all the pieces so that sort of 2/3 of the plan can be built with the municipal building in place. So you can build the entire street network we've proposed. You can build the large format building, the parking structure, 2 of the L-shaped buildings, the first phase of the building south of the Triangle Park, and you can do the Amtrak redo, all with the municipal building in place. Obviously, the plan gets much better, completed, all those kinds of things if that building were to be relocated. But anyway, the phasing worked out sort of wonderfully. So in the list of the projects, we can study that. So in terms of sequence, there are a few parcels that are out parcels. The town does not yet control the portion of the dentist building, that parcel in the lower left, and then the proposed drop-off south of the track. So, and then of course surveying the land and consolidating it into a form you can then subdivide and zone. So once the land is assembled and surveyed, we would subdivide it and zone it. And we're recommending, just because it's always good practice, a form-based code. Again, Normal's the leader in adopting that. And then this is micro print, but we wanted to get all on one page. There are different ways to solicit developers, and the town knows plenty about this. We don't have to say too much, other than I think you're in a stronger position in many ways than you have been in the past. It's a very clean site to build on, flat, adjacent to downtown. It's just kind of a sweet deal. So, and then this is a gift to the staff in terms of a homework assignment. So I'm making eye contact with some of the people that will fill this out. So this is all the stuff you have to do, and we've sort of guessed at who might want to, what it is, and then we have not filled in lead or deadline, timeline. So this is an opportunity, I think, to sort of, fill this in, figure out who's doing what over what period of time, and we've given you 10 years, actually 9 years now. So, that's doable, that's realistic, and that's where we are. So thank you, and look forward to questions and comments and so on. 29 minutes.
Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
It was a quick run through there. You packed a lot of information in there. Questions about anything, Ms. Smith?
When you were talking about not allowing gas in there, not allowing gas utilities
Yeah.
and making it all electric, is there any provision for the possibility of drilling down for thermal sources? Because in following what Europe is going through with the cutoff of fuel from Russia, there's more exploration of that as an option. Does this plan have space to accommodate that? I know it's still costly.
So is that sort of geo-exchange heating
Yes.
and cooling? Yeah, so you can put that underneath buildings, so it actually doesn't take space. The town is creative enough to maybe be able to even consider an easement in a public way, if you could sort out the utilities and not have them in conflict. But you can most certainly do that. So I'll just say in our architectural practice, we did the first geothermal heated and cooled building in Chicago. It was the Chicago Center for Green Technology, designed in 1999 and opened in 2002. And we did geothermal off and on through about 2016. The heat pump technology for air-to-air heat pumps has gotten so much better in that time. The economics of drilling down and doing those wells has changed. So we do it less and less frequently. So you can get a pretty good, Mitsubishi has introduced something called the Hyperheat heat pump, which is suited to our climate. Finally, prior to that, we were all using kind of warm weather heat pumps and hoping for the best in the winter. And so they're rated for -13 Fahrenheit. So that's a pretty cold winter day. So we think you can get away without it. So we're not doing it in, and all the projects I showed you, actually let me take that back. So the one on the upper left here did do geothermal heating and cooling or geo exchange. The other two did not. So, but yeah, there's room for it.
Okay.
I guess that I should have said, yes, there's room for it. Sorry.
I'd add too that I've got heat pumps in my house. It's a long story, but a couple of years ago when we had the big freeze, and it was like 18, 19 below, I was getting heat out of the heat
Oh.
pumps.
There you go.
Quite group tonight.
I put everybody to sleep.
You
I'm
just
so
wowed 'em.
sorry. It's just
North.
amp it up. Amp it up.
So
Hey, Stan. No, it's all right.
there we go. Are there any businesses that we've solicited to be anchors or to come into this area?
No. And so the answer is that wasn't part of our scope. SP Friedman, I think we talked about this briefly, did a market analysis to figure out what there was demand for, but their scope and our scope didn't include any tenant solicitation. So no.
Okay, so this is all pure speculation.
Well, no. A market study is not speculation. It is reasoned analysis by a highly esteemed professional consulting firm. So
Okay.
it's not speculation. It's a report.
If we build it, it would be built on speculation.
Uh,
The report, you're right. would
Well,
be
I mean,
based
if you,
on
in
input.
so far, I don't mean to be combative, but I disagree. If you consider building an apartment building in the strongest rental market and not knowing who's renting unit 4B speculative, then yes, it's speculative. But apartment buildings don't usually identify their tenants before they're built.
Okay. If we do the gas, or if we don't have gas there, aren't we going to limit tenants?
So that is a good question. Thank you for asking that. So this issue is mature in coastal markets in California, Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., New York. The issue there tends to be restaurants, which are kind of old school and haven't all made the flip. And so there's plenty of restaurants that first person in the morning turns on the gas grill, turns on the vent hood, and it just burns gas all day, whether you're cooking or not. And that's kind of kitchen culture for, the last 75 or 100 years. So there's plenty of emerging restaurants. I'm not a restaurant guy or a cook, ask my wife. But there are restaurants that are figuring it out. And so it can limit you if you want a certain kind of cuisine that is a flame-based cooking, then they would probably want gas. You could still do it with a mobile propane tank if that was a need. But I'll just say I think restaurant-wise, sort of heavy restaurants, Uptown is very kind of well equipped with good restaurant choices now. And so if I were adding more restaurants, I would be tempted to steer them north of the tracks. So you might have lighter touch food service down here that doesn't need the super grill. But that is That's the legitimate, that's the single biggest pushback we get. No one actually wants gas cooking in apartment units anymore, both for health reasons, for insurance reasons. It's very hard to set an induction cooktop on fire, but one of the leading causes of fires in multifamily buildings is the cooktop. Somebody didn't notice, and a rag or something, catches flame, and there you go. So, anyway, glad to talk about that further.
Sure, that would be a concern of mine. Not so much in the retail or in the residential space, but in the retail space. Now we're going to limit ourselves. We see with, the first version of Uptown, north of the tracks, we've got spaces that are still vacant, that we had planned for restaurants to come in and they're not here. You've got Trail East, Trail West, there's several banks that are vacant. The space underneath the College Avenue garage still hasn't been built out. So, I don't see the market driving this push for building more things or more space because they haven't absorbed the space that we currently have. So, I would like to see this area opened up to the public and let the free market decide on what they want to do with it, sell it as a big lot and see if they put something forward. I think that might be something good we should think about. Another concern I have is we're saying we might do this in 10 years. Well, recently, we as a council have talked about the library going somewhere on the Beltway, so not being an anchor south of the tracks. And the dentist office, we as a council, mayor and town manager proposed that we sold the town's ownership interest in the dental office. And now we're looking at, buying the other half. So there's a little disconnect there as to what we're doing or what the intent of selling that property, knowing that we're going to have to buy it back, was. So again, this is an idea. I'd like to see the free market come up with it because then they're on the hook for paying for it and finding users rather than the taxpayers. And if a big anchor came in, then yes, the government should help push things along to get the development and all the pieces in place because we can play that piece. But just to build for the sake of building without businesses and the anchors going in there is where I think we're missing the mark.
Well, I would agree with you on one thing, Mr. Nord, that right now would be a very bad time to build a restaurant or a commercial space. We're finding that out right now because the market has changed so dramatically in that market. But who knows what that market will be in 3 to 5 years. And you're absolutely correct too that the private sector is going to have to drive this in terms of use. And that this is a plan for space. This isn't really dictating any specific use in it. So the market will dictate that. The developer who builds these buildings will dictate what he thinks or she thinks is the appropriate use that they can market and sell.
So are we defining here's what the layout's going to be like and then wait for somebody to come build it? I mean, what are we doing with this?
This is an overarching plan that just shows how land use, I think, would be the appropriate way of talking about this.
Yeah. How the 7, almost 8 acres could develop and accomplish all these goals as identified by Mr. Farr, that with the goals having been determined through citizen input, sustainability, etc. So this is simply a plan. We're not saying the town's going to build every one of these buildings. We're simply saying this is a plan that will guide us for the next 10 years on how that 7, almost 8 acres could develop. I do want to point out that you mentioned the dentist office on the southeast corner of this site. Mr. Nord, you had indicated to me on numerous occasions that you didn't want the town to be in the landlord business and wanted us to put our various properties back on the tax rolls. And so I did ask council if there was an interest in selling, which is what generated that prior conversation. So you raised the issue. I just wanted to point out that the conversation did take place at my direction because you asked me to multiple times to get rid of the town's property. So I asked council if there was an interest. So we currently still own those, the east half of that building, and, you know, and as Mr. Farr's plan points out, there are other properties on the site that are not under municipal ownership, but of the nearly 8 acres, much of it currently is a tax exempt municipal property.
Sure. It seems odd, though. The town owns hundreds of properties. Well, possibly hundreds of properties, but a lot of properties. But for this one property that surely staff had known that there was going to be some interest in us needing to acquire it because this would be coming forward, but that would be one that we would sell, knowing in short amount of time we'd be buying it back, probably, you know, at a loss. So,
Which is why I asked council if there was an interest, and there was not, and so we didn't pursue that. We still own the,
yeah.
I think we can identify that one as a speculation as well. Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. Doug, you're actually on the right side of a question stood out to me as you were going through the presentation.
Sure.
Reconcile with me the proposal to turn Linden to road diet
Oh.
wall that will be the only entrance or exit for Phoenix Taylor
Yeah.
into the uptown south. What that traffic
So, over my right shoulder, I think are multiple traffic engineers, so I'm not gonna make eye contact with them as I answer your question. So, but it,
right and left.
okay, yeah, I'm flanked, I'm not even gonna look. So, but if you, I refer you to this illustrative plan, and, you know, it is not an engineering blessed plan, so it is a planner plan. So there's a step that has to happen after this. But what you can, what we're showing here is that the median between blocks, between Taylor and Phoenix, between Phoenix and Irving, between Irving and Stewart, when you get closer to the intersection, the median goes away. So there's a left turn lane, so you can sort of stack cars out of the traffic flow to make a left turn into the study area from the south, or a right turn in from the north. So we think it's perfectly simpatico that there's, you know, what usually happens when you're doing a road diet like this is there's a negotiation about how much island that you actually get. So, you know, we haven't done a traffic engineering study. That comes as sort of next step. But if someone decides, you know, we really want to have capacity to stack 3, 4, 5, 6 cars, what happens is the island, that center median just gets short to accommodate that turning, stacking requirement. So we push for fewer stacking cars, but this is one I think we'd want to make sure there was sort of free flow into it. So, yeah.
If I could weigh in on that too, Mr. Preston, not being a traffic engineer, but I'm very, very aware of what's going on that street, having a business there for 25 years. And I would say there's probably an hour and a half a day where you consider that street carrying traffic. There are times, and that's something that would come out of an engineering study, is when we would get a freight train through there and what happens when that happens. But for the most part, that street doesn't need 4 lanes, except for maybe a half hour and a half a day.
At the same time, though, you would presumably be adding traffic to that area based on just up south of town. Am I not talking close? Presumably there would be additional traffic in that area feeding onto and coming off of Linden, though, with the destination downtown to come if it's built out for the plan. One more question, Doug, so I make sure I understand.
Sure.
The plan has drop off for buses on that, I think it's number 3, kind of on the northwest side of the Taylor Boulevard Street. Is there any other street parking beyond the deck in the plan as proposed for this area?
Yeah, so as I mentioned in the presentation, our street section for Phoenix and Irving shows bike lanes, and I think that's an adjustment I'm going to recommend and direct staff to do before we turn the report in, that we would have those short segments of street there would have on-street parking. I mean, it would only add, let's just say 20 on-street parking spaces, but I think they're in a significant location that if we want to have some modest liner commercial space supported on that main street, you'd want that sort of side street parking. The other thing to say is both sides of that divided parkway, we incorporate on-street parking everywhere except where the bus drop-off is, to get, kids to and from the Children's Discovery Museum. So we've got several hundred linear feet of on-street parking on that north-south street. If you can see it's sort of small to see, but in the two courtyards, you see those little sort of lines, those are off-street parking spaces, probably allocated to the buildings. And so we're saying most of the parking for all of these buildings would occur in the structure. Some would be available on site for drop-off, ADA spaces, things like that, where walking half a block wouldn't fly for people. So we've kind of mostly it's in the structure, but a little bit distributed.
Thanks. Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you.
He's
Gonna
giving
make
you
IT
that.
happy and eat the microphone. Thank you for the presentation. It's exciting to see it to this point. We've been having a south of the tracks, then dubbed 2.0 conversation for a very long time, and to see it to this point is exciting, frankly.
Yeah. Good.
And
Agreed.
for those watching, so this isn't exactly what will happen. This existed when Uptown was first getting redeveloped, and an idea of where things are going to go, and a whole bunch of citizen input telling us what they'd like to see and how they'd like to see it come. So, and then some very astute professionals, experts at what they do, to advise us about the types of development that could work and succeed in the area. So a whole lot of local input and expert input going to this. Just to summarize, I had some of the questions that Mr. Preston already talked about, but my overall impression was it appears from what I'm seeing in the pictures that most of the residential is served on-site parking, and then whatever mixed use bottom floor would be principally served by that parking structure. Is that generally the concept, or did I have that backwards?
Councilman, I might reverse it. So the
Okay.
retail, if the commercial at grade is more of a retail function, you want some immediate sort of impulse on-street parking, and you would regulate it to make sure people don't hog spaces. And, depending on the business, you could run in and do your business and get on. So I would say it's the overnight guests, if it's, assuming it's mostly residential, but there could conceivably sort of be either live, work, or office. Those cars would be parked in the deck when you're staying a long time. So, and as I say, the little bit of incidental sort of off-street parking there it's just a good practice to have something on site, deliveries, ADA parking, things like that.
Thank you for correcting my interpretation here, but it seems like you're addressing all of the uses appropriately. Do we have any idea of, I know this is a design idea or a design concept, and I imagine it would depend on what the structure actually is, but what a multi-story structure could accommodate? Do we have any concept of that there, or what?
You mean in terms of number of units, or?
Sorry, the parking. On the
Oh, yeah,
parking structure concept.
I'm going to call on Olivia, who is here,
And-
who
and-
may remember better than I do.
If we don't, that's okay.
Here we go. So, as proposed, is this 3 stories of
Right there,
parking,
240 spaces.
Yeah.
Perfect. I
Thank
missed that in the presentation.
There
Or
we go.
282
There we go.
total. There we go. So quite a lot of parking.
Yeah, and so just to have the mental math in your head, so there's 240 parking spaces, and then on the prior slide, we are showing, if we do 4 residential floors, rule of thumb, in terms of just grossing up a square footage into an apartment unit count, 320 residential units might be accommodated, and then we've got sort of a total of 282 parking spaces. So that may be controversial to the audience or to the council, I don't know. The premise here is that we're hoping that there's enough walking, biking activity that we don't need the full 1.0 car per dwelling unit. But that will evolve over time. And then if we wanted to make the parking structure taller, and once it's working and the ramps are going, you can just basically 80 spaces per floor. So if we wanted 320 spaces in the deck and then another 42 elsewhere, we'd be really right at 1-to-1. So we could, if the concern was we want 1-to-1, you can build it. I think it's an interesting conversation to have with this audience because of all the parking decks that were built as part of Uptown Original. And so I think we've learned that it's not unique to Normal, but people don't find the spaces on the 3rd and 4th floors of the parking deck as quickly as they find loop-de-loop-de-loop. I'm looking, we'll look 15 minutes for anything at grade, and then I don't want to go, up there. So there's a diminishing utility to building things that people can't see. So that's why to feel good about it, you could add the extra floor, but I just don't think it would be a return on investment.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm not suggesting
No, I know.
a direction, but I appreciate the feedback and the insight on that, and kind of looking and certainly now I feel like I'm commenting on something you as an expert know far more than I about, but certainly urban development and the young people that are being attracted here are very interested. I ran across a young man newly here from LA, and he loves our community, loves our Constitution Trail, is appreciative of the transit system such as it is, and doesn't own a vehicle and has no intention of it. Just used to the LA situation, but does use all the other amenities of Uber and Lyft and that avail themselves here, but doesn't want to buy a car. I think that we certainly have to plan for that and design in that direction.
Yeah. If I may, it may seem like a stretch, but we worked on the master plan for the Googleplex in Palo Alto. And, I think of Rivian as a kind of in the family of tech firms. Completely routine there that if there was a pocket of Rivian employees that need to get 4 miles away to a certain Rivian facility, they'd figure out vans or buses to get them back and forth, and no one would touch a car to get to and from work. That's completely routine. So we could overbuild spaces if we didn't coordinate with the principal employers, right? So.
And pretty much I think that's what the CEO said as much when he came and talked to us back in 2016, is the idea that people don't own cars individually outright. So,
trucks maybe, but not cars.
yeah, absolutely. The no gas service is an interesting idea. I think that's worth a discussion here. For clarity, anybody paying attention, any vacancy in Uptown isn't dependent on whether or not it has gas service. That's more of a market force, not whether or not there's a gas line to any vacant building. But I think as a community that's been so focused on sustainability, we did a 2-year sustainability plan with literally over 1,000, close to 2,000 people putting input into it, that it's worth a community conversation about that and what we want to try to foster without trying to limit what can be built on the site. Again, let the market dictate what actually goes there, but let's try to work on the sustainability aspect of it. So I think it's worth a public conversation, and I appreciate the call out. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I am glad to see on the south side of the circle, so on the north side of the tracks, you are talking about a small drop-off lane there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm glad to see that, and I'm glad to see some of the other improvements for the Children's Discovery Museum and an additional space for drop-off and pickup. Just a general comment more than anything else, and I don't know if staff could speak to this, or at some point this could be brought to our conversation here. And one is, I'd like to see, don't think we've seen the results of the parking study that has been done recently, so I'd like to see that sort of overlay the results of a recent parking study on this, because parking is and always has been an issue for Uptown, real or perceived. So I would very much like to see that in conjunction with this plan. And then the second thing is, can anyone comment as to whether there's been at least some preliminary interest from developers to the point raised earlier about would this be market driven? The answer is yes. And just to what end have we begun to hear the phone ringing, perhaps?
Well, I can say that we have not had any preliminary detailed discussions with any prospective developer. Everyone's kind of waiting for the plan to
Today.
be rolled out.
Mhm.
Correct. We did have individuals participate in the various public input processes, including housing providers of various market rate and affordable and other things. So there are people that we invited to the table that we knew would have an interest in this plan, and they offered input, and I think they're waiting to see this result. And, but it won't be until after council adopts the plan that we start to pick up and, run full speed ahead.
I think we'll wrap it up here. We have allocated an hour for this, and we're at that moment. So, thank you for the presentation today, and I mean, it's a very complex plan, but it's getting a lot of things accomplished, I think, that we're trying to see accomplished as a community. I would certainly encourage council members and people in the audience or at large, if there are further questions, please direct them to the council or to the city manager of issues that may need more explanation. We'll be talking about this again when the plan comes forward, but this doesn't have to be the end of the discussion tonight. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
We'll take about 7 minutes here, and then we'll come back for a council meeting at about 7:05.
Thanks.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
Test. 1, 2. Is this right? Yep. Test.
Can I speak to you briefly about some of the concerns you raised about the plan? Sure. One of the things that came up quite a bit, of course, was the idea that perhaps it's not going to be filled as much as people would anticipate, because we don't really have any specific
see north of the tracks. So until that starts being used, then I don't see a demand for more people coming in because we've got, like I said, Trail East, nothing there, Trail West, underneath the parking garage, nothing, Marion Steiner still vacant, there's 2 banks that are vacant, there's lots of vacancy up there. So until that starts filling in, I think it's premature to be, for the town, to be spending taxpayer dollars to develop more potentially vacant space.
Sure. And one of the other elements of the plan that didn't come up in your concerns as much, but I was curious what your thoughts in general was prioritizing walkability. Do you think that could potentially be an ethos that the town brings forward a little bit more?
That's the 1, 2, 3.
Well, whatever's working or not working north of the track would probably be anything or keeping south of the track. So once we have success north of the track, then build on that.
No, I'll be okay, because I got some soup waiting at home. It was just a little. Broccoli and cheese soup. Let me get those little individual servings. They're pretty good. Where's he? Is he hiding? He's an Illini fan. I have to rub in the Indiana University win. I was wondering if that was what really led to his not being here.
Council members, we're going to start. This thing's not working. What's on? Now it is. Council members, we're going to start again. If you'd please come back to the. Call order a regular meeting for the Normal Town Council for February 20th, 2023. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus?
Here.
Lorenz?
Here.
Ward?
Here.
Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Harris? Here. Mr. Preston?
Here.
Mr. McCarthy?
Here.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no public comment prior to the meeting. We do have one public commenter at the end of the meeting. We have 5 items on the omnibus agenda tonight. They will be taken with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Ms. Smith?
Item E as in Edgar.
Mr. Nord?
B as in Bravo, D as in Delta.
Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Items considered for omnibus are approval of the minutes of the public hearing of February 6, 2023, and approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 6, 2023. A resolution to accept bids and authorize a 2-year contract with Guilford Services Incorporated, doing business as Illinois Portable Toilets Incorporated, to provide portable toilets and hand washing units in the amount of $48,965. Please call the roll.
Ms. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston, McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Those items are approved. Item B is a report to receive and file town of Normal expenditures for payment as of February 15th, 2023. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
So on expense page 16, under the water replacement fund and sewer replacement fund, there's two expenses for enterprise leases. One's for almost $7,000, the other's for like $1,000. Are these the vehicles that we're now leasing instead of purchasing?
I believe that is true, Mr. Nord. I believe that enterprise lease was entered into a couple of years ago, perhaps. Taken a while for enterprise to have the pickup trucks available.
Sure. So my question is, in the past, we had saved up money and then bought these vehicles with cash. This is the first lease that I recall seeing. The money that we saved up, I assume it was in this enterprise fund. Has that money that we saved up, has it stayed in the enterprise fund, or was that in the equipment replacement fund, which was under the general fund?
No, the enterprise funds, which are the water fund and the sewer fund, have their own vehicle and equipment replacement account. So the answer to your question is the funds that were set aside to replace old vehicles in both the sewer fund and the water fund were saved in those own enterprise accounts, and those funds are still there.
Okay, good. Then please let us know if those get transferred out. Otherwise, if we now have an excess amount of funds, I'd like to see us kind of get ahead in some other projects that we may not have been able to fund before, and that have to deal with the sewer and the water funds. Thank you.
Further on that item? Please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Lorenz,
Aye.
Aye. That item is approved. Item D is a resolution to waive the formal bidding process and accept quotes totaling $87,251.04 from Dell for the purchase of computer equipment. Mr. Nord?
I so move.
Second.
Mr. Nord?
In the write-up, it says that we're replacing these computers on what, a 3-year cycle or a 4-year cycle? What's the town's policy?
I believe it says 4-year. I'm looking at the council report. Says after 4 years, this equipment is considered end of life, that the warranty expires. And I know a couple years ago, Mr. Nord, you had asked us to track the kind of effort and the risk once the equipment goes out of warranty. And I know Ms. Gadaraju has done that, and she is still recommending that we replace when the warranty expires.
Okay. Well, in the write-up, it also says that this equipment was bought in 2020.
The fiscal year ending 2020, so 1920.
Okay, so it really will be at least 4 years old before we are replacing the equipment. Okay, good. That was one thing that I wanted to point out. Then the other thing I just wanted to show is there are other places that have got a longer computer retention period. Laptops may be a little shorter than desktops, but for example, ISU, this is off the website for their refreshment procedures, at least 4 years old for their equipment before they replace them. Minnesota IT services, laptops 4 years, desktops 5 years. Montclair State University 5-year minimum replacement policy. The USDA, the Forest Service, they do theirs every 5 years. And what they had said was there was this Federal Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act. And what this did, this basically promoted government-wide best practices to help agencies avoid unnecessary duplicative spending and activities to reduce costs. So that way it forced federal agencies to at least look at extending some of their retention periods when it was necessary. Texas has got one, 3 to 4 years for laptops, 4 to 5 years for PCs. And in their write-up, they say that if you need something sooner, there's a process for that. It's just your department will be charged a little bit more, to give it some flexibility. So where I'm going with this is I would like to see us look at possibly extending the life of maybe desktops a little bit further because they don't get the abuse that a laptop would, and look at these other things that these federal agencies are doing to save federal taxpayers, because I got to imagine, if they're saving money there, that there's a lot of examples for why we should be able to do it here. And if there's warranties that will last 5 years, then I just don't see the reason why we shouldn't be able to kind of extend the life on some of our equipment purchases and save our taxpayers a little bit of money.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Further on the item? Mr. McCarthy?
Thank you. I appreciate a robust discussion on this. Probably some other time. I know we've had a lot on it. I do just want to point out the danger of not benchmarking similar agencies and similar use cases for technological devices. And duplicative spending policies are not end-of-life purchasing policies. They're designed to reduce purchasing similar things over top of each other rather than end-of-life purchasing policies, which state there's a useful life based on expected failures in the technological components of a system and how long a warranty lasts. Shockingly to everybody in attendance is right at about the end of those expected life of those component parts to start breaking down. And that's an industry standard practice in computers. And so, and that's why warranties beyond those useful lives are very costly to purchase. And so to extend the life of computers that the industry knows are going to fail will cost us a lot of money in warranty and service items, which is a policy of how this IT operation works. And so I'm not in support of adding that kind of cost for negligently maybe getting a little bit more time and adding a bunch more service work potentially, because we know those things are going to break. So without going any further than that, I'll just stop there. Thanks, Mayor.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Loren?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That item, resolution is approved. Item E is a resolution to accept bids and award a contract with Stark Excavating for the Carrick Road and Main Street improvements in the amount of $1,698,279.63. Ms. Smith?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Smith?
I just wanted some clarification on a couple of items about this particular agenda item. And for one thing, I do see that there is a $600,000 grant and there is some TIF funding. How much does the town have to pay up front before we see reimbursement dollars?
Well, actually, the town pays the whole thing. The state grant is on a reimbursement basis, so once the project gets underway, we can then start getting reimbursed for the $600,000. So the net cost on this contract to the town would be just over $1 million, since $600,000 is coming from the state. Then, in terms of reimbursement from the TIF, which is the Tax Increment Financing District, the town gets that over a period of time because the TIF is funded by the growth in the EAV. So when the EAV grows each year, when the assessor evaluates the project, it just recently finished phase 2. So once that all becomes fully assessed and the property owner is paying their property taxes on that, that increment of, from where it started before the investment began and where it now is valued, the increment goes into the TIF fund, and that's when we start drawing our reimbursement.
And I do see that one of the proposals for the roadway is a center turn lane instead of, it's not wide enough for 4-lane, correct?
Well, that is true. It's not wide enough, and we're not planning a 4-lane at this point. Maybe in the future, when further development occurs on the north side, maybe another lane would come down, as needed. But right now, we're proposing 3 lanes.
And with the turn lane, if there is further development in an interim basis, it would accommodate turn traffic going either into the existing warehouse or any new development that might come on the north of the road then.
That is correct. And this improvement has also been coordinated with IDOT because Main Street is Business 51, which is IDOT property. So this has all been coordinated with IDOT.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Mr. Norris?
A question, how many years are left on that TIF?
I'm taking a glance at Mr. Hune. I don't recall. I'm not sure. I hate to throw out a number. All right, I'm not sure, Mr. Nord. We'll look it up.
I'm sorry. Why don't you go to your next question and we'll get that information for you.
Really, that was it,
Oh.
because that's gonna tell us kind of how much money we're looking to get back. Or
Well-
get into the TIF, but I don't need the answer right now, that's,
Oh, okay.
Mayor, sorry, if I may, it does say in our packet that TIF was established in 2013.
I'm sorry?
It does say in our packet, in our report for this, that the TIF was established in 2013.
So add 26
What
years
is it,
to that.
26 years?
Okay.
2036.
so there'll be
Thank
a
you.
number of years that we'll be able to recoup that.
Thanks, team.
you.
Further on this item?
Thank you. I just want to point out, it seems like we just casually stroll by that the town just got another $600,000 grant brought back to our community to do infrastructure work in our community. And I don't want to let those things go, because $600,000 for infrastructure work is not a trivial amount. And I just always want to make sure that we're pointing that out and appreciating staff for going out and finding these funds to bring our tax dollars back to our community to do infrastructure projects right in our community, instead of our tax dollars principally going to other communities to do their projects. So appreciate the staff's work on that.
Mr. McCarthy, if I could just jump in real quickly, I think we really need to extend appreciation to former Representative Dan Brady. This was an allocation he put in the state budget
Perfect.
in terms of a capital investment. So much appreciation to him and his team.
Thank you for reminding me.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Aye.
Mrs. Loren?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That resolution is approved. We have no general orders or new business tonight. We do have one public commenter, Mr. Ulmer. If you want to come forward?
Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I have some concerns about road maintenance. 2 areas. One is pavement preservation. I've talked to Ryan Otto about this, and he said more is coming. But when I looked at the plans in the 5-year document, $100,000 to pavement preservation. Normal, I think, would win an award for the most concrete popping out, because year after year, seams and expansion joints are not waterproofed. This has been going on for a couple of decades, at least in Normal. Matter of fact, heading east on College, east of Towanda, I hit a chunk of road about this big. I usually avoid them, but I missed it. Don't any of you ever notice anything from a golf ball size to a baseball size to a softball size of concrete popped out every spring? And don't you ever notice, I sent you pictures of the weeds growing up, big weeds sometimes in street cracks. When was the last time you think those were waterproofed or sealed? Not in 5 or 6 or 10 years. So I don't care how much we spend or you spend on repaving and all that. At the rate which we allow brand new cement roads, major thoroughfares, as well as the new subdivisions deteriorate, we'll never catch up on road repair. Number 2, and I'm gonna have my car checked this next week. It's time for an oil change, and if there's any undercarriage damage, you'll hear from me. Okay, my second is streetlights, which you all know are near and dear to me through the years. 2 things. One, I alerted both the town and Ameren when that sidewalk that Karen Smith requested on Towanda to be put in. I was assured that those, I believe, 7 lights that hadn't worked in probably 10 years would be repaired. I wanted to make sure that they didn't have to tear up the new sidewalks. They still aren't working. Miss Reese, telling me that Normal's got 3,000 lights. Those haven't worked in 10 years. At least quit paying the bill. Somebody from this town has to work with a local engineer from Ameren to get that done. They don't want to repair them because it's fed by undergrounds. Also, a cable company knocked out the 3 of the 4 lights north of the bridge where Towanda goes over the tracks. I saw Ameren working there one time. I saw a contractor working at the base of one of those poles. 3 out of the 4 still don't work. That was 6 or 9 months ago. Why the heck do we pay for these lights? And I've read all you people emails on this, and none of you care. That's it. And so and Ryan Otto did assure me that more would be done on pavement preservation, but you've ignored pavement preservation. You've ignored these lights where
Mr.
many are out.
Ulmer, you're exceeding your time. Please finish up.
Okay. I think where there's a cluster of lights out, that's different than a 1 or a 2 somewhere. And I've made everyone aware of that for years. Thank you.
Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Mr. Nord?
So we've had residents contact us about streets, lights being out. You know, we've all seen the emails. The town has got a system where we can report complaints. And, you know, earlier, I guess it would have been later last year, I had asked the town for a list of like all the complaints. This was specifically dealing with like water. I'm not sure if they included all the other ones. But what I would like to see the council as a whole do is ask staff that whenever they receive complaints, they enter it into the system. And maybe every 6 months, the entire council gets a list of all the reports that have been filed from our constituents. And the town staff put something on there as to if it was resolved or not. That way we can kind of keep track of it. And we don't have residents coming to us at council meetings saying, hey, we've been complaining about these problems for a long time and they're not getting addressed. At least that way we will have seen it, and we can look at the report and say, hey, this is 6 months old, this is a year old. We can address that with the town manager before residents come in and complain. So that's a request that I'm going to put out, because Mr. Ulmer is not the first person that has kind of brought up these issues. So thank you.
Further comments, concerns? Mr. McCarthy?
Oh, I was just gonna share. We in terms of, I guess, if there's confusion about the town and streetlights, we get a few, an occasion, where some citizens report to us streetlights that aren't working. And as council is aware, we then report that to Ameren. We have no ability to demand Ameren's attention. We have no ability to demand a timeline when Ameren repairs such lights. In my last communication with Mr. Ulmer, I do appreciate his position. I did share that we do have over 3,000 streetlights, and we do notify Ameren on a regular basis. It used to be weekly. I'm not sure what the occasion is. Mr. Otto's still nodding his head. Weekly with a report of lights that aren't working that we're aware of. Ameren at one point had the same manpower and material and supply chain issues that every other contractor was dealing with, and was challenged to get some streetlights working. We will continue to work to get Ameren to provide attention to non-functioning streetlights, but unfortunately, a streetlight here and a streetlight there in the 3,000 overall doesn't get attention in situations where maybe multiple lights in a row aren't working, like Mr. Ulmer had indicated. Maybe we can get Ameren's closer attention. Not sure. But again, in terms of our agreement with Ameren as a utility provider, we're somewhat limited on what we can demand. And then also in terms of pavement, as council knows, we do, again, this is in response to public comment, we have increased our pavement efforts, as council knows, in terms of the community investment plan council just adopted and the proposed budget you reviewed that you'll be seeing on March 6th. I think our investment in pavement is over 100% more than it used to be. So we will be making progress. Correct.
Mr. McCarthy?
Just as a response, do I recall recently that we purchased some pavement crack equipment or something to address that? I
Yes,
see
that's
a
correct.
nodding.
There was some equipment for the Streets Division of Public Works to use for pothole filling. And
Okay.
they're using it and we'll be hitting potholes hard this week because of our mild February weather. But we hope to be making progress in that regard as well.
So in addition to budgeted repairs, we've also purchased some equipment to help support that. Okay. I thought I remember that, but I couldn't. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz?
And I'd like to add one other response to Mr. Ulmer's concern about pavement preservation. We did have an email correspondence, he and I, along with Ms. Reese. The $100,000 pavement preservation line item in the budget is actually under contract services. So it'll be the cost of outside help where needed. That is by no means the exhaustive amount that we're putting into pavement preservation. So I just want to clarify that the number is far greater than 100,000. That just is what's designated for contractual services if needed.
Motion for adjournment, please.
So move.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. It will be quick. I just wanted to, I know that the Uptown South Master Plan will be coming back to us presumably for formal action at a later time, but since we did have the presentation on it tonight, I did want to give a public shout out. Thank you to the not only the steering committee who's been involved in that process for quite some time, but also the citizens and the stakeholders who vested their time and ideas and interest into that process and were part of one of our public meetings to make sure that their voices were heard for their town and their community. I think is a good thing all the way around. That's it.
Thank you. Now I'll take that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Mr. Nord?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.